How on earth did we go from this to this?
This is hard.
And holdy.
I almost died. I'm inside the building.
You clipped into the building.
Battlefield 1 was such a good game, despite it being released nearly 10 years ago. Even the earlier titles like Battlefield 3 and 4 still hold up today. Compare that with the current Battlefield 2042, and it looks like a game that was made by a completely different studio. But what if that was actually the case? EA actually made a load of questionable decisions after the release of BF1, almost as if they wanted to kill the franchise. So today I'm going to be explaining all of this, and ultimately how EA ruined Battlefield and why it could be the end of the franchise as we know it. But for many years before it all went bad, EA and the creators of Battlefield, DICE, had worked well together. In January 2000, the Swedish game company Digital Illusion CE, commonly known as DICE, acquired an unknown indie game company called Refraction Games. Refraction Games was pretty much a nobody, but they made a game which caught the eye of DICE. Code Eagle was an FPS game with a strong emphasis on vehicle combat with armored cars, tanks, motorcycles, fighter planes, and even boats, alongside infantry players set in large, open environments both in single-player campaigns and multiplayer mode. Sound familiar? Well, the features were good and all, but there's just one problem. It didn't really perform well. However, DICE was particularly interested in the potential of this game and could see a diamond in the rough. On top of that, they were also impressed with the founder of Refraction Games, Patrick Soderlund. In fact, they liked this up-and-coming game developer so much that within 2 years of joining the company, he was made CEO of DICE. This marked the beginning of DICE's shift away from what they had previously been making, which were pinball and racing games, to create their first proper FPS game. DICE knew that they would have to play with Refraction's strengths. Codename Eagle was basically the grandfather of the Battlefield series, and what Refraction did with Codename Eagle, they could do better. And so, they started working on this brand new project just a few months after the acquisition. And then on September 10th, 2002, DICE released their brand new game. Battlefield 1942 was widely considered DICE's breakthrough game, marking a significant departure from their earlier work. BF 1942 revolutionized the first-person shooter genre by introducing large-scale online multiplayer battles supporting up to 64 players. A key innovation was the introduction of the Conquest game mode, which became a staple of the Battlefield series. What's more, BF 1942 had 5 distinct classes: the Scout, Assault, Medic, Anti-Tank, and Engineer. This combination of large-scale maps, diverse vehicle combat, and class-based gameplay created a unique and immersive experience that distinguished BF 1942 from the more traditional infantry-focused shooters at the time. It was a game developer's dream. It was a massive success, selling over 3 million copies by 2004, and even won the BAFTA's Game of the Year award, along with several other awards. And DICE was only getting started. They quickly continued to expand the Battlefield universe with the release of 2 expansion packs for Battlefield 1942, The Road to Rome and Secret Weapons of World War II, which both launched in 2003. Remember these two, they'll be important later. Then, in 2004, DICE released Battlefield Vietnam, which transported the core Battlefield formula to the jungles and rice paddies of the Vietnam War.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
DICE wanted to make Battlefield their main franchise because it's a money-printing machine. So, they kept developing new games and kept adding new game mechanics, like the ability for passengers to fire from the sides of vehicles, and the option to airlift vehicles into battle via helicopters. Never seen any game do that, right, PlanetSide 2? And then just a year later in 2005, Battlefield 2 was launched, shifting the setting to the early 21st century with a fictional global conflict. This sequel featured updated graphics, refined squad mechanics that allowed for better team coordination, and integrated in-game voice chat, further making the Battlefield franchise better than its counterparts. From that point onward, DICE's Battlefield franchise sold over 7 million copies worldwide. A new milestone had been achieved, and they were in the same league as major game companies such as Rockstar Games, Sony, and Ubisoft. However, this also made them a target of another major game company, Electronic Arts. EA was already a successful game company in the late 90s, making and producing games such as Madden NFL, FIFA, NBA Live, The Sims, Medal of Honor series, and so much more. Cash grabs. But from 1987 up to 2004, EA kept acquiring game companies because they wanted to be a leading global business as a games provider and publisher, even venturing into the mobile scene. This expansionist mindset was basically the reason why they kept on acquiring companies even though they were terrible at keeping them. And you can see this in the list of companies they've acquired in the past 40 years, many of which are now either merged or shut down. When EA saw the success of DICE with their Battlefield games, they wanted a piece of it. You know, it's EA, that's how they are. Since November 2004, EA has been trying to take over DICE. Of course, this took some time to actually happen because they didn't have the right amount of shareholders to agree with them. In 2006, however, EA finally acquired the rights to DICE's assets and company shares, integrating DICE into their own studio and giving them the task of growing the Battlefield franchise. This was supposed to be a good move. After all, EA's a huge publisher and it would help DICE in polishing their Battlefield formula, especially now that they would have all the resources they need to create an even better game than what they did in the past. However, EA had already been meddling with DICE even 3 years prior to the acquisition.
Wait a minute!
Remember the first 2 DLCs of Battlefield 1942, which I mentioned earlier? The Road to Rome and Secret Weapons of World War II released in 2003? Well, DICE were the ones who created these expansions, but it was EA, DICE's publisher at the time, who ordered these expansions to be made, and charged people with some of the most aggravating prices that the public had ever seen at the time. The Road to Rome expansion was priced at $23. Sounds cheap, right? Wait until you calculate for inflation and you'll see that you would have paid $41.82 in today's money. But what did it actually add? Well, I think Eurogamer's Martin Taylor said it best. Frankly, a complement of 6 maps and some extra toys is pathetic, and does not constitute an expansion in my mind. Taylor concluded that review by saying, "For the rest of you casual players, unless you've really got 18 euros or $23, burning a hole in your wallet, it would probably be wise to steer clear if only to show EA that this kind of blatant cash-in is pretty unacceptable." This is proof that EA was doing this shit even back in 2003. But what's worse was that this second expansion to Battlefield 1942 Secret Weapons of World War II was priced even higher at $25 but was seen as being just as bad. And unfortunately, this was just a sign of worse things to come. Patrick Soderlund was the main person pushing EA's acquisition of DICE. Because of this, he was rewarded with a big paycheck and was even promoted to vice president of EA's worldwide studios while also retaining his role as CEO of DICE. At first, this worked well. Not only did he lead DICE's franchise to success, but he also protected DICE employees and their creative ideas from EA's corporate decisions that would have immediately ruined the franchise from the get-go. But of course, this didn't last forever. In January this year, Risible, someone who claimed to be an ex-DICE developer, posted this on his Blue Sky account. He said that the problems first started around 2016 when 2 key leaders from the original DICE team left the company. These were Carl Magnus Trudson, who at the time was the vice president of group strategy at EA, and the other was called Patrick Bach, who was the general manager and vice president of DICE. Now, officially they both left on good terms, but the post mentions rumors that they were both pushed out instead. In fact, 2016 was also the last time a really good Battlefield game was released by most people's standards. BF1. Coincidence? So Soderlund and DICE quickly replaced these important figures, but then were hit with another massive blow. Battlefront 2 was a big mess. The loot boxes were a big controversy, and that hurt the sales of the game big time. Now, EA being EA, lower sales meant that they were going to have to put more pressure on DICE and Soderlund to make a comeback with their game BF5. Despite selling a substantial 7.3 million units by the end of the year, which was roughly within its first month and a half, BF5 sold 1 million units short of EA's projected sales. Well, this is EA we're talking about here, so this is nothing new. But releasing a game that's fundamentally broken and riddled with bugs at launch is straight up unacceptable. For example, finely tuned sound effects designed to break your eardrums, an update that crashes your computer, or time to kill changes that mean it now takes forever to kill enemy players. Battlefield 5 was riddled with bugs, and I can't really remember any Battlefield game that was this bad at launch. I even experienced some of this, like crashing after launching. I wasn't as pissed since I bought the game a year later after release, but I don't think it's right to pay $60 for any game that doesn't run properly. This failure with the release, along with the failure to meet the internal targets, were the primary reasons why EA considered this a commercial disappointment. EA's CEO Andrew Wilson stated that the game's marketing campaign failed to capture the attention of players. He mentioned a lack of creative center, suggesting the messaging and promotion around the game weren't effective in generating sufficient hype and interest. But just look at the initial trailer for the game. BF5 was supposed to be a historical and realistic gritty game like all the other previous Battlefields. But this trailer is anything but that. I mean, it literally showed a woman with a prosthetic arm, like come on. And we can't forget Soderlund's comments about the backlash. Dislikes have been removed off YouTube since then, but at the time, the reveal trailer had 372,000 likes and almost 600,000 dislikes. DICE and Soderlund had dropped 2 stinkers in a row, and EA was not gonna let that slide. EA quickly fired Soderlund, however this had 2 knock-on effects. Firstly, Soderlund had made mistakes, but he was still part of the original DICE team, and it protected DICE and, as an extension, the Battlefield games from EA's classic actions, such as trying to create a live service game and loads of microtransactions, which just were not Battlefield. Secondly, Soderlund, after leaving DICE and EA, started his own gaming studio called Embark Studios. And what did he start doing? Well, he started to hire all of his old colleagues from EA and DICE, especially stripping the original Battlefield team away from working on other Battlefield games. Now, this mass exodus and major managerial changes was happening right during the development of the next Battlefield game, Battlefield 2042. And I'm sure we all know how that went.
I'm sorry, I don't play video games that lie to me, you know?
But then... Oh. Yeah, we'll just go to B. We'll be there soon.
Dude, all of these skyscrapers have no collision at all. I'm slamming into every single... Oh, there we go. That one works. Okay, that one works.
No worries. Yep. Off the B flag. It's around this direction.
What the fuck is this game?
Yep. This direction. Yep. I think we're going the right way.
It's not Battlefield. It's Hoverfield 2040 Hovercraft.
Yeah, we're going the right way.
That is a grenade.
It was one of the most anticipated games for a lot of Battlefield fans and people who were sick of the same Call of Duty formula and wanted to try what Battlefield had to offer. Unfortunately, Battlefield 2042 would become one of the most disastrous launches of a Battlefield title ever. The game was released with numerous bugs, glitches, and technical issues across all platforms. Many players felt the game was unfinished and not ready for release. What's more, several features that were present in previous battle games, such as voice chat and traditional scoreboard, were also missing at launch. Like, how could you miss one of the core features of a Battlefield game? I don't get it. There were also significant performance issues and a graphical downgrade compared to previous titles. The introduction of specialists, a hero shooter mechanic, instead of the traditional class-based system also alienated many players who preferred the faceless soldiers in the older Battlefield titles. I mean, come on, who wants to play Overwatch in a Battlefield game? Just play Marvel Rivals, man. At launch, there were also server stability problems that further contributed to a negative player experience. But the false marketing is absolutely their greatest sin, as it led people to believe that EA was actually gonna do something after that disastrous BF5 launch. This is what Battlefield 2042 could have been. These were just some of the reasons why people absolutely despised Battlefield 2042. Personally, I've played very little of the game, so I don't know about you guys who pre-ordered and played this game, but from what I've learned, it's been worse than Battlefield 5, and because it's also a live service game and it's built on EA's bullshit. So, what now? EA and DICE failed to meet targets for 3 games in a row, and EA decided to do what EA always does. Completely overhaul and try to milk the fuck out of the game. I mean, this is what EA does. For example, Bullfrog Productions. They created popular titles like Populous, Theme Park, and Dungeon Keeper. Acquired in 1995, but many key figures left and the studio was eventually merged into another EA studio in 2001. Or when they shut down Visceral, famous for creating the Dead Space franchise. I still can't forgive EA for what they've done to the Command & Conquer series and Westwood Studios, or several others in this list that are now defunct, merged, or shut down. I hate to say it, but the future is grim for Battlefield players. Risible warned people not to be too optimistic about the future of Battlefield. EA always wanted their own Call of Duty franchise, a game released annually, filled with microtransactions, battle passes, skins, and everything fucking bad you can think of. After BF 2042, EA got rid of almost all of the original DICE team who made bangers such as BF3 and BF1. Even in 2022, another key member, Lars Gustafsson, aka Mr. fucking Battlefield, also left after 20 years of being at the company. On a positive note, he started his own gaming studio, TTK, with many other of the original DICE developers, so maybe either TTK or Embark Studios led by Soderlund will be able to create a game that is the spiritual successor to the great old Battlefield games. At least I hope so. I hope that I'm wrong and the next Battlefield game is great. BF3 and BF1 are two of my favorite games of all time, but I just don't want to get my hopes up now that EA has pretty much 100% of creative control, or lack of it, with the future of Battlefield games. Another thing that could really hurt Battlefield and all other games is the release of GTA 6. If you want to know why, then click here.